episode from Creators of New Earth. Today we have Kevin Snow, and we've been working through. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you.
We've been working through the chakras. Well, we are going to make our way from the first chakra to the seventh one. So last Sunday we talked all about the first chakra, and you can go back and listen to that if you missed it. And today we'll
Yeah.
be talking about the second chakra. But before we get into that, I'd like to do some housekeeping. So if you are watching this now or on the replay, I'm going to ask you a big favor. So recently I was and am permanently locked out of Facebook, never to return. And um, so in order to avert that, I started a new Facebook page, and I then got locked out of that Facebook page too. So I started doing some research to see what was happening and what's happening to thousands, who knows, maybe millions of people. There are articles about it all over the internet, and there are even YouTube videos about it. So um, Facebook has recently required many of their users to use what's called a two-step verification process. And for some people, no matter which method that they are offered that they try, it doesn't work for them and they become permanently locked out of their accounts. There are some YouTube videos to help resolve this problem. They didn't, in my case, work. And one of the reasons I believe is because there is somebody on Facebook who had my phone number before me, and that phone number is attached to her account. And in the past, when I've had issues, not the same issue, but different issues, I tried to contact this person. However, I feel that that page is no longer accessed by the person who used to have my phone number. And I don't get any messages back. So I don't know whether this person just decided to leave Facebook or started a new page or is maybe deceased. I have no clue. So the unfortunate part of that is that Facebook was one of the ways that I was promoting my blog and promoting this YouTube channel, and then I also had a Facebook page called Creators of New Earth. So this is how I was sharing my videos and such. So to you, the audience, I am going to ask if you have a Facebook account and you feel called, if you would be so kind as to share this video to your Facebook page and to any groups you feel might be interested in this, I would ask that you don't tag me. Don't put Julie Pershin as a way of tagging me, because I can only, if you tag somebody on Facebook, they have to approve that tag in order for the video or post
Mm.
to show up on their page. However, my account, though I'm locked out of it, it is still active. So if you were to copy and paste this link and post it to my page, Julie Pershin, that is something you could do just without tagging me. So this is a way that, and you can also put it on your own page as well. Um, there are two ways to post to Facebook. So one, you would just say, you would go to my page and it'll give you the opportunity to post, and you can just copy and paste the link in there. There's another option to post that says write. It's a little square box and it has a pencil. And so it says you can write the post. So it's the same thing. You could still copy and paste the link there. And you could write letting people know, if you wanted, that I am locked out of Facebook, but that I will be continuing to post my, I will keep my page active, which I kind of have to because I have no way of shutting it down anyway. So that's the housekeeping for now. And without further ado, Kevin and I will go right into the second chakra. Um,
Right.
Thank you for being here, Kevin. And
Absolutely.
second chakra is a big one for me because So for those of you who don't know, Kevin and I have been working together for 5 years. So Kevin
Mhm.
is my mentor, and yeah, we have connections in many dimensions, and present life connection
Absolutely.
and past life connection, and hopefully future life connections too. So
Absolutely.
one thing that Kevin and I have been working on transforming is blocks in my own second chakra. And I have had wounding to my second chakra in this lifetime, but one of the biggest blocks that we're working on are blocks that came in through my maternal and paternal bloodlines. And so this is a very different kind of a block than just a block that you carry on your own. Um,
Mhm.
with no attachment to the maternal or paternal um, bloodlines. So, still working on that to this day. and
It's a process.
yes, it is very much a process. And
Mhm.
it is part of my life's work. Whoever wishes to take up the task of working with their ancestral bloodlines can use the gifts from those bloodlines and can also help to transform any stagnation, any trauma, any patterns that are still holding in the DNA. So
Mhm.
it's not easy work and it's not for everybody, but it's a soul contract that I had before coming in, and um, so here we are. So
Here
anyway,
we are.
thank you, Kevin.
Excellent. Absolutely, and I will definitely follow the Facebook instructions and get you posted on our Facebook
Thank
and
you.
all of that good stuff as well. And we'll put this on our YouTube channel, so we'll get it out there. It'll get
Okay,
out there.
thank thank you. Um, so can you give us well, okay. So maybe let's back up a little bit. I want to delve into the second chakra, maybe have you give us a little bit of a
Mhm.
definition. But for those who weren't present last week, can you explain what it means that we are multidimensional beings,
Mhm.
and each of the chakras is a dimension of ourselves. And maybe just a little recap on what that first dimension is within
Mhm.
ourself, and then maybe going forward, what is this second dimension of ourselves? What is this second
Mhm.
chakra related to and tied to and connected with?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that this idea of chakras, so we have to start there essentially and say this is a thought form that lags into beliefs and beliefs that come into our emotional self, and all of that we will describe as we're going through the chakras. But so we understand or become aware of information through this system, and so it is this stuff that's what is this stuff that we're swimming in, and, and so this stuff then translates. So I would say in this work that I do, that this universal life force energy, prana, chi, is love. And so it's an interesting translation of word, but I do that a lot in my work, and I'll translate it into there is a loving frequency vibration. And we can talk about that more too, as far as how the vibration of my voice becomes light. So actually, words become light, and that happens in these things that we call chakras. And so that's why they are a color. And that's why that color is a frequency of light. And so this is where we kind of break it down and we can combine ourselves in the metaphysician world and in the physical world that we live in. And we say we can be on any part of this belief structure that chakras don't exist, or maybe they're just made up in our mind, or maybe we're just imagining all this. When I do my shamanic work, I definitely make sure that I uh, identify to people, yes, I am working with imagination, and everything that we imagine can become real in the physical world. And so is as we work with these chakras imagined into something that really makes sense. And we talked about that earlier, and this is basically that each one of these balls of light has an intro and an extro of energy, and it has a connectivity to this ganglion nerve bundle off the spine that connects to our endocrine system. And so, to make it more real, that this second chakra that we're working on is part of the ganglion nerve bundle that is in that sacral area of the body. I would think of that as hips and lower back. And this is in this world of the guidance that I'm getting connected into the kidneys and even into the bladder. And this is a creative center, basically. So, this is where we create. And why do we say that? Because this is where we take this stuff that we're swimming in and make it into something physical. And so that oftentimes is called manifesting. I'll use the word create a lot as well. So that kind of fits into how we create other humans, is mostly in this chakra. And so that's where we can say there is a foundation, that this is a center of creation, and that we can take energies and make something physical out of them. And that requires chemistry in the physical body. So lots to talk about here, but basically we're working from a place of trust. That's where we started with the root chakra, and then we're leading into what I'm calling faith. And faith is a little different definition than what we're used to, because faith is, in this definition, is the I trust that there are spirit guides, that there is a metaphysical world and a spiritual world, and that those worlds I can interact with. And when I interact with them and ask for, request, interact with in a intentional, prayerful way, that those things then can come back into the physical. And when I see them do that through like a license plate, like we've talked about, a sequence of songs, song lyrics, any way that we're basically taking information in through our senses. I had a little message this morning. We were talking about something over breakfast, and one of our bookshelves just collapsed. And so those things mean something. And so that's where we stop and say, all right, who's trying to send us a message? That's pretty big message. So let's see if we can get clear on that. And it is, turns out, about relationship, which is great because that's what we're talking about here today. And so this is all how it fits together. And and so we can walk through these steps. We can give you stones and oils, and we'll definitely do that. And but this basically, this dimensional question helps us because my bookshelf here has dimensions. So it has height and width and depth. That would be three dimensions. And so if we think of that as our lower three chakras, basically are the height and width and depth of this particular human that we are. That's one way to think about it, that this is three dimensions of lower chakras below the heart. And we can take that dimensional conversation and say each one of these chakras is a dimension. And so we say that, okay, this is root chakra, the dimension of trust, the dimension of connection to tribe, connection to group, and how we're working now as translating the information that we talked about in the root, and we're bringing that up into the second chakra, which is relationship with self and relationship with people, individual people. That can also be our relationship with work. That can be our relationship with pretty much anything you can think of in this moment. So we're working from, first, we need a trust that is developed through a group. And now we start into that second chakra, developing relationships into individual relationships. That's how we come from dependent in our core, in this lower chakra, this lowest root chakra. And now we move into codependence. So that conversation is really important in our second chakra. And that is, now we're coming into the 3 to 4 year old range, all the way to about 12, 13, 14, right? Coming into our teens. Those are the codependent years. And so it's a way to redefine codependence as well, as not a bad thing that you shouldn't be doing in your relationship. It is a stage of development that you may not have emerged out of entirely. And so that emergence from dependence into codependence is what we're talking about today. How does that sound?
Oh, it sounds really good. I'm just pondering.
Yeah.
So what happens if a person doesn't move from dependence to codependence?
Yeah. That's really important because this is what most of us in our family systems and our tribes have done a fairly good job at, is that we are able to notice developmental clues in individual children, and sometimes they are developmental clues of something that's missing. And so there could be a missing component that can keep you in a physical disability, right? A ability that isn't quite what we have. We definitely look at those things in a different way, in a positive way of saying, that might be an increased ability in another area that we're just not recognizing. And so that's also true, but it can create a child that is dependent on these people, right? Parents or community, however that works, to throughout their entire life, where they hold this level of dependence because they are unable to do certain things that are acts of daily living, let's just say. So what would happen is that we would stay in this dependent role, which is an extreme hierarchy. And so that's what we try and think of these developmental roles as the hierarchy of. So this is where I'm moving from, I'm at a lower level dependent to this higher level that is taking care of me. And so we can kind of roll that into how the government takes care of me, how society takes care of me, how religion takes care of me, all of these things that I can be dependent on. But that dependency in as we move into our adultness has to have some balance. And even if we're unable to care for ourselves, we still have to feel a codependence, which is less of a hierarchy, and an independence, which is a balancing of hierarchy, and then interdependence, which is a connection to something bigger than us. So now we're actually connecting into this metaphysical world more and to the spiritual world. And I'll discern that pretty consistently that spirit is the oneness, the non dual, and the metaphysical has duality, but it's just not in the physical world. And so that's kind of what we're doing here is we're understanding that dimensionality as well, that everything emerges from a non-dual into duality first in the metaphysical and then into the physical. And so that's what technically what we're doing. We're emerging out of our spirit, our big spirit, into a soul, and then that soul comes into a physical body and goes through these developmental steps. And so this is developmental psychology in relationship to chakras, and basically saying there's an overlay that we can make between these dependent years and these codependent years and these independent years. And so it's really important to put that context in place that we've kind of vilified codependence and said, this is what's ruining relationships, ruining the world, creating all addictions. I do say that, right? There is also that truth that when we stay in that codependency, we're locked into a hierarchy. And so in our own personal relationships, we stay in that something or someone is above me and is telling me what to do. And that basically creates tension as we're developing through our stages.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess spirit will know if this question is appropriate for this
Yeah,
platform or if it or not, and you can let me know. But
sure.
I'm gonna ask something about myself, but only
hmm
because I have a feeling that what I'm going through in this lifetime, I'm not the only one. And as a
Makes
matter of
sense.
fact, part of the reason that I have chosen this lesson to work through um,
hmm
this
Yeah.
second chakra block from the maternal and paternal lineages is
hmm
so that I could master that and help humanity with that. Like anchoring instead of anchoring the problem, anchoring the solution.
That
You know,
sounds great.
that I'm an
Yeah.
anchor of that
Hmm.
within this earthly realm. And so my question is, so whatever this block is,
Hmm.
um, did that carry forward through me? Because what I see is that I feel like my parents, because of their own situations, you know,
Hmm.
they didn't have somebody emotionally available to them,
Right.
and then
Hmm.
they weren't necessarily emotionally available to me. Not
Right.
meaning like that I didn't feel cared or loved for or whatever, but
Yeah.
um, without going into all the ins and outs of that.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel that that made me um, not dependent or codependent, but actually very independent as
Right.
a means of survival. That it's like, well, I don't, it's like, yes, of course I had a
Hmm.
roof over my head and I knew I was loved and had all those things, but
Hmm.
emotionally,
Right.
um, I really had to raise myself, you know, and
Absolutely.
so what, I mean, if you had to
Yeah.
say what did that cause in me? Did it cause dependence? Did it cause codependence? Did it cause
Hmm.
independence? Did it cause a lack of those things? Did it cause an excess of one of them? Like,
Hmm.
what? Yeah, how do we look at that?
That's great. Yeah, I definitely, this is one of the things I do in my work a lot is we just identify with each relationship what the percentages are. So that's what I read on the pendulum here. and and so this ability to say that even in so even if these people are no longer here, right? So that there still is a relationship and it persists. So this is where we think people may have left our physical realm and we're no longer in relationship with them. And that definitely is not true as far as the work that I see. And so that's where we're also saying that's how these lineages come forward is if it doesn't get resolved, it moves to the next generation. And so I think that awareness is very good in saying that I'm now dealing not only with some of my issues with my parents, I'm dealing with their issues, and so on and so on and so on, right? It gets a little convoluted at 7 generations. That's where most of the indigenous traditions say this is how far back we can actually look at specifics. But then what we're really looking at is it doesn't have to be specifics because it comes through as, like you're saying, an intense independence. Like I will do this myself. And if I'm not getting this emotional availability, which is major, this is a really major component of the bonding process. This is also one of the confusions when we translate psychological worlds into this. Um, we use exact words. So in spiritual work, we talk about attachment as this is the negativa or things that we're attached to. In psychology, we talk about attachment as this is what happened to us as children. So much in the same way I'm talking about dependencies, we use that word attachment. So it is a clear attachment. It's a good, and really that word means bonding. So, how did we make a bond with these individual people, and how are we playing that out with our relationships moving forward? And so, like you're saying, we will create this independent stance very early on if we're really not getting this what we need. And so that's very true that we can all of a sudden start thinking, well, I need to make my own grilled cheese sandwich, right? Something like that, right? So, just using the very daily kind of construct. I need to, when I'm having an emotional upset, I've already learned that I can't turn to my parent to be able to process that information. And so now, how do I do this internally? And this is where we develop a lot of strategies that work and then don't. And so that's another way to kind of think about how our attachments, where we create a bond and we create a good bond, or we create a broken bond. And that broken bond then moves us into independent. So these three levels all have their own level of fear. So if we just think of ourselves as infants without anyone to care for us, there's going to be a lot of fear in this physical body, and it's going to translate as you grow. And that may not clear, and that's what you're calling a block. And so when we think of energy, we think of it takes work to create a block in energy. In fact, energy never stops moving. So energy in chakras is always moving. And then we're mentally or emotionally creating a lack of movement. And so that takes a lot of our chi, prana, energy in order to actually sustain a block. So that's another way to think about what a block is there's never a block. Energy never stops moving. So if there is one that we're experiencing, we're doing that mentally and emotionally. And typically that is showing up on all chakra levels, but that's what we are actively doing. And why are we doing that? So that we can create a solution, like you said. So I think that this solution based approach is what is the solution, which would be how do I get the energy to move again? So, how do I get my second chakra energy to move again? I recognize that there's fear or anger or sadness. And you'll hear me say this throughout this whole process that we're doing. And I put this emotion to the Mother Earth. I imagine that it's leaving me in some beautiful way, that it leaves me and goes to the earth. And so that's how we're recognizing this inner relationship with our third chakra, emotional body, and our second chakra, physical body. So the second chakra is our physical body. It represents all of these organs, actually. And so that's another interesting thing to think about. This whole thing that is me physically is all linked into this second chakra. And it's all linked into how I'm in relationship. So in the Lakota tradition, basically, I'm, privy to always completing a prayer, starting a prayer with Matakwe Oasi. And this is basically Matakawe Oyasin is what it looks like. That's how I say it. But in this way, it means I am related to everything. And so if I have a right relationship, jumping into Buddhism, and if my relationship is right, that means it is without anger, sadness, and fear, and without the belief structures of not fair, not enough, and abandonment. And so that is a right relationship with another, is that I have been able to put those to the earth and the sky and have a clear, right? So not blocked way of understanding this relationship. So I'm not filtering it through my wounds, my traumas, my history, my genetics. I am filtering it through love. And so I have neutralized that relationship. So it's a lot to say. This is the simplicity of how we're in right relationship. But it takes a ton of work essentially to do that, as we know.
Yesterday, you can tell me if I'm on track or not, but yesterday I was thinking about these, the second chakra wound and the maternal and paternal lineages. And I thought, okay, I don't really have access to, like, I only know what I know about my mom and about my dad. And then there's all this
Totally.
stuff I
Yeah.
don't know. And then
Hmm.
my grandparents and my great grandparents and so forth. And then I was realizing, wow, that, like, if I follow either of those lineages back as far as they could possibly go, I'm going to end up at the first man or the first woman on the
Totally.
planet,
Yeah. Definitely.
right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then I don't know how, I get guided through spirit to go looking at these things,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I was feeling like I was taking too much of a mental approach
Makes
and
sense.
not
Hmm.
intuitive enough. And so I thought, why don't you pose a question and start writing with your left hand, you know?
Okay. Cool.
And so long story short, I ended up with this biological term, um, quadrivalent. And I won't go into it, but it has to do with, I mean, basically, if you take it all the way back, it has to do with cell division,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Hmm.
Mitosis and
Yeah.
meiosis. Well, it has to do with the
Hmm.
meiosis process more than
Hmm.
homologous cells, they're called. So
Yeah.
okay, bringing it back into the practical and the now, I thought, so first I'm thinking very like, okay, looking at my parents and my lineage under a microscope, and then I'm trying to follow it as far back as I can. And then I'm realizing, wow, maybe this isn't about individual stories. Maybe it's about the original fear of separation. So in other words, when the sperm and the egg meet, they create one cell, right? And that's oneness and unity. And then, cell division is what creates the individual. And
Correct.
we move from the formless, and
Mm-hmm.
our soul decides, oh, I want to individuate. I want to see what it looks like not to be oneness, but what it looks like to be one individual, right? And
Yeah.
I think that if there is a wound or a fear or original wound or original fear, it is that, like, wow, I have now, I've descended, right,
Yep.
from the all into this thing called individuation, and now there is this grand illusion of separation, because you
Yes.
have to separate to individual, because you have to parse yourself out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to me, I thought, well, that could be the original wound or the original fear.
It's 100%. This is so when we think of it as a mental and emotional construct, so it would be the ultimate abandonment, so that we are coming from this connectivity to all into an individuated self. And so that is the feeling of abandonment. We can replicate that through family system. We can replicate that through jobs. We can replicate that through friendships. So when we go back to this belief, this mistaken belief, and that would be right. So the mistake, so sin, original mistake is I am not connected to everything that is. I am an individual. And we have most of our world is operating from that standpoint, that I'm an individual self, and we can see when we look around the world, people make pretty bad decisions based on themselves and the whole when they feel they're separate from it. And so that is absolutely what you're talking about is I have a belief structure that I am separate. And the only reason I have that belief is so I can imagine that I'm a physical being. So that's helpful. Um, Ram Dass, Ram Dass said this thing that I liked a lot, and it was well clearing. And so that God, so we'll use God as the non-dual force, right? So not as an individual, not as a name, not as any of the characters that are in these different religions, but as the non-dual force. And as I emerge from that non-duality into duality and begin to, like you're talking with the cells, separate and separate and separate and separate, that my job as a human being is to offer back to source. So that's when we say, why are we here? We're here to serve. We're here to serve this self, right? As self-care. And in that, we can then move that into service of others and then service of the grand scheme of things. And that messaging and that notion was like, that makes sense finally. That here I am as an individual, and my daily practice is to offer back to source this messaging. So, this thing that what is it to be human? And I'm putting back into the collective, which would be still metaphysical, and into spirit. So, that's creating development. And so I really do think that what you're talking about here is core, that we are core in this abandonment belief. And that belief basically creates the struggle that we are mostly experiencing. And what is the main emotion that is tied to that? Fear.
Mhm. Yeah, you and I have this ongoing because for you, your experience is that fear resides in the liver, and for me, it's I see that it resides in the kidneys until I see otherwise. I'm not trying to hold on to it. It's just that my perspective hasn't shifted,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even right down to the fact that the adrenals sit on top of the kidneys, and
Hmm.
when we're fearful, that gets activated.
Hmm.
But you and I can have
Absolutely.
that discussion another time.
Hmm.
When you say mistake or original sin, wouldn't it be not a mistake like an error we made, but like a case of mistaken identity?
Totally right. I mean, this is this identity that I am a non-dual spirit, and that's 80% of who I am. And then I am a metaphysical being, a soul, and I am a physical being. And so I am all three of those things. So then we get, if we go into the scientific method, we go from there's one answer to, in the one answer, when there is one answer, it is love, and that is it. When we go into this method of understanding ourselves, it's three answers: it's love, the non dual, and my physical and metaphysical self. My emotions are not physical. They don't show up physically unless I'm super angry or I'm very sad, tears are coming down. Right. So they can be physical, they can be made physical, but they're not. They're metaphysical. And the beliefs are also not physical. And so we have this non-physical self, and then we have this physical self that is the second chakra, where these things are made. And that's like, so that's why we're talking about this in a way of here is this physical self and this amazing process, right? So when we try and take the kidney or the liver and make it into one thing, it gets really hard, right? Because everything's connected to everything. So
Mhm.
that's where we're seeing, like, when we talk about one chakra, it's hard not to talk about all of them. So we keep coming back into let's talk about this chakra, but it's related to everything else. And so that's what we want to understand is this is where relationship lives. And so my relationship to my spiritual self is I am never abandoned and never alone. I am always connected to this major component of my beingness, which is non dual. And so when I know that, I have peace. And peace basically is happiness, third chakra, joy, third chakra, and this combination of those two things, which is my chemistry is being created from love instead of fear, separation, abandonment, not enough. So all of that is true.
Um, so the first chakra is the non-physical,
Subphysical is what I call it. Yeah. Hmm.
sub-physical, sorry, not
Yeah. Yeah.
non-physical,
Hmm.
sub-physical, and
Yeah.
it has a connection to the elementals.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And the second chakra is physical, as you just
Hmm.
mentioned,
Yeah.
and it has a connection. We kind of parsed this out as a teaser to introduce this time, but
Yeah.
it connects to the realm of angels.
Yeah. Definitely.
And but before we go into that, I heard something last
Hmm.
night, and I'm wondering if you could clarify. I
Sure.
don't remember where I heard it. Oh, I listened to a lot of Gigi Young on YouTube.
Okay.
She's great. She really knows her way around cosmology and the epochs of different planets, and how all of the planets in the solar system really are just different
Okay.
expressions of Earth itself. And she knows about interdimensionality and all of
Nice.
these things.
Nice. Awesome.
So anyway, she's saying that humans, because now there's so much misinformation going around about how humans came into being,
Sure. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
we were created by aliens, and all of this stuff, all this
Hmm.
misinformation that's trying to like create a new religion through
Sure.
ufology, or through
Hmm.
scientism, or through
Hmm.
it as a way of hurting the human race, where they want them to go, which is essentially off a cliff, but we'll go there later. So um she was saying that in the angelic hierarchical realm, um humans are basically 10th level angels.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, as far as the levels are concerned, what we're doing here is we're saying that the second chakra is the more human level of angelic realm. So, so that there is basically frequency. If we're talking frequency, there's the higher octave or frequency of angelic realms, and that is in the third eye, sixth chakra, and then the lower. And so basically, higher and lower mean above the heart, below the heart. So more in the physical realm. And so I think of it like it's like a corporate structure. It's basically there are people, right, in these places that do certain jobs. And these angels are essentially, we think of them, we anthropomorphize them as human or people, but they are basically a job. So, like Raphael being the kind of counterpart of the second chakra that governs this chakra. So, the leader of the second chakra, Archangel Raphael. And so when we think of this, we think, okay, then the archangels higher, right? So we always do this higher and lower, but we're not doing better or worse. We're doing ascension. So we're basically saying as above, so below. So so as above the heart, so below the heart. And so Raphael basically is an angel that has more or a closer frequency to me. So if my frequency is, and like we said, the in this scale that I read, the average human is around 40, right? So on that scale, it's a plus and minus 3,300. And so if we see the average human kind of in the center of that, and then as we're moving up that scale, we're engaging these different entities. And so this angelic realm, the archangels, is in like the 2000 range. So thinking of that difference, right, that's quite a bit different. And so this is where we can roll because humans have the ability to modulate frequency. Angels do not. That's why we call it a job. It's like the job of 2400 frequency is Raphael. And there is no modulation of that frequency. So we have to meet somewhere. So we've got to pray and set intention and raise vibration and frequency through that process to access these higher realms of angels. And so when we're praying, that's what we're doing is we're actually modulating our frequency out of a relatively attached human space into a more detached angelic space. And so that's one way of understanding what these angels are. And then I have to see them basically, this is how they communicate as there's three realms. So we see this chakra basically with three balls in it. And it's this one sphere or dimensional reality of the archangels, and another sphere or dimensional reality of the guardian angels, and then another of these they have a lot of different names, but legion angels is the one that kind of comes through the most. And we think of these legion angels as the ones like in the pictures that are battling, working for for us. So and most of the connectivity that I do in my work is just in this guardian angel and archangel realm, and how an angel basically has a way of working with an individual. And so that's kind of, I use that as an assessment process of if this angel's working with you, then this is the chakra that you're working in, and this is what you're working on. And so that's how we assess when we do this work. And so that's basically just kind of, and my work is always trying to bring it into what I perceive to be a simpler answer. So that may have sounded very complex, but when we do this in work, we'll just basically say, you're working with Raphael, you're working with Ariel, you're working with, right, this is the angel that's with you. And I have a general idea from talking to them what they do. And so now we can have a working platform moving forward.
So I kind of got lost at the so are you saying that like that each chakra is kind of like an onion with three parts?
You definitely, yeah. I kind of see it as like all things are things that we can see physically.
Mhm.
And so if we use your original metaphor of cell, I think that's also another good way to understand, like, is it a cell? Yeah. And so our entirety of our being is just one cell as well, where we have this shimmering gold, sheath that basically surrounds our chakra system. And this is where, if we break it into, now our chakra system is one ball with different balls in it. And so that's how I visualize it, is
Mm,
right. And so that would be dimensional as well, like however many dimensions there are, which could be infinite, I don't know. And so,
mhm,
but there is a ball and there's balls inside of that. So I would say ball as cell.
mhm.
And using it, making it physical, I think is very helpful. That, everything that's represented in the physical world is represented in the metaphysical world. And so we can see it. That's what fractals are. That's what all these things are, that we can see the repeating patterns. So we can see it in the physical. That does substantiate that it does exist in the metaphysical. So that's another way of thinking about it.
When you talked about those three levels, did you say maybe I went somewhere else. So did you say like human, angel, and then something else? You said something about chakras having three components and
Yeah,
angels. Can you just briefly review that
totally.
again?
Yeah. So basically, humans, right? Humans are angels, right? So we do have this angelic presence because we are made up of the same stuff. And so what I in my work call humans angels, I don't, but I do say that we that we are doing this work, and we're also doing something else. So we're sleeping, right? We're sleeping, hopefully we're sleeping, a third of our life. And so in that way, what's happening there and how are we interacting relationship wise? And so when we put it in the angelic realm, that guardian angel would be somebody that was human, so has left the human realm and is going through the developmental process of becoming higher level angel. And higher level is just frequency. And so basically guardian angels, kind of tend to exist in this like 900 to 1500, so they're closer to us frequency wise. And the legion, I think, is in between those two. So I think so that's that structure. So if we put it in frequency to, we're rolling somewhere in that 300, right? 40 to 300 realm. We can also manifest ourselves quite a bit lower than that, right? So that's positive, saying that we're doing that. And and we're relating to a guardian angel that has a job, and it could be somebody that's part of our genetic lineage or not. I've seen both. And so that's also interesting to understand when they come, and how some people have awareness of them. Like there's an angel at the foot of my bed and they're talking to me. Like that does happen. And, so there's people basically that are, we can also look at those realms too. We can die and not know that we're dead and become a ghost, right? So that means that we have all of this still kind of heaviness of this world. We don't have the frequency basically to transition into these other levels. So yeah, I mean, when we're talking about dimensions, right, this brain is always trying to bring it back into,
Yeah,
right, this default mode network is trying to bring it back into a story that we understand. So when
yeah.
we're going out here, it is hard to listen to, and it is definitely like, all right. But if we can bring it back into something simple about relationship and say, this is how I'm in relationship with Raphael, I think that would be a good takeaway for our session today.
Okay. Yeah, I think, well, I'll go back and listen to what you said about the three parts because it was very it started off very linear, and that's what I was trying to get back to, is the simplicity. It sounds like maybe
Yeah.
you're saying we have a physical component and then we have a component that is, you know, not physical and
Mhm.
not physical, and then we have a component that's not physical. I think that's what.
Perfect. Yeah.
um you sent me a chart, and I tried to practice sharing it with the audience on here
Uh-huh.
last night. So what I did is I took it and I put it in Dropbox, and then I
Nice.
brought it back here. But then when it shows up on the screen, it's so small, I don't think anybody would even be able to read it. So,
Oh, okay. All right.
um,
We can review. This is what we're talking about. So,
yeah.
right. So
Yeah,
this is
that
the
shows
chart.
up bigger than what I would have been able to share.
Excellent. Okay. And so, take a screenshot of that, right? And
Yeah,
uh,
blow it up.
right, exactly. And so, what we're going to do is the second chakra, and we'll just kind of go through um, what stone, right? So, just giving it very practical, like what can I use to make this chakra work better, right? So, and how do I know that it isn't? Well, I know that it isn't if my physical body has imbalance. I know that it isn't if my relationships are out of balance, if I'm having hierarchical relationships and trapped in codependent relationships, or like you said, where I'm becoming incredibly independent and separate from the people that I'm relating to, right? So these are basically evidential journeys of this is how the second chakra is out of balance. And so what we do here is we say using the stone carnelian. And so, just encouraged you to look these up and get a sense of what are people saying about carnelian. One of the problems with stonework, I think, this is a personal opinion, but I think when I look into stonework, it gets kind of mashed up, just like the angel conversation, right? Where, I look up carnelian, it's like, this is good for the second chakra, and then it's good for meditation, and it's good for this, and it's right. So, I mean, it says that it's good for a lot of things. So then how do I know how to use it? Well, simplicity, stones, wear them. So ring, bracelet, necklace, put it on the altar. So those are the things to do with stones, and to hold them while you're meditating. That's another way to do that. So I have a bracelet that's carnelian, and I hold it while I'm meditating, and I set the intention, balance my relationships today. And so that's very simple intentionality. I can then put this into the context of I recommend essential oils in the work that I do a lot, and I recommend nutmeg a lot. And
Where would they put it? Would they put that like below their umbilical
mhm,
cord, somewhere below their umbilical cord and sorry, below
yeah,
their belly button and above their
hmm,
pubic symphysis in that area
absolutely, yes.
somewhere?
One of my early meditations, I said, focus in on the second chakra. It's 3 inches below your belly button. And so I got some feedback that that was kind of a silly way to say it, but I like that too. And so, right, so the navel, or this culmination of energies, right? It is the umbilical cord. It is where all of this physical information has been translated. So also true. 3 inches below, so basically 3 fingers below the navel is where this chakra resides, the center of this chakra. And so doing the nutmeg, I usually recommend lower back because many people have lower back issues. And those lower back issues are related to lower intestines, kidneys, right? Stuff going on in there that's out of balance,
Yeah.
blocked, right? And so nutmeg is a calmative. And it's an ancient hallucinogen actually in the Tibetan tradition. So, when you take a lot of nutmeg internally, you will hallucinate the same way you would with a mushroom or with ayahuasca, or right. So it has that quality to that plant as well, but it's mostly calmative. And in this way, with the oil, 3 drops of that oil with a carrier oil on the lower back will bring more calm. And when do we usually want calm? In the night before we go to sleep. And so diffusing that or putting it on in that way is what I recommend for a calmative of the second chakra. And so that's definitely think that using the stone carnelian and nutmeg in conjunction with each other can bring intentionality, because these things have the intention. And so just like angels have an intention, these things that are earthly have an intention. And so we're just connecting with their intention and saying, this is where I want to focus my energy. And we'll do that in session a lot, where we'll say, this is where we're focused. And predominantly in session work, it is second and sixth chakra. That's really where most humans are working, is in their second and sixth container, basically.
Oh, you mean
And
I'm
so
not special?
you absolutely are special. And so that
So is
that
everybody
is true.
else.
Absolutely, in their own way. And so, right. And so this is where we move back and forth. So in sessions, we'll be working on the second. I'll recommend things like this, and we'll go up to the sixth, and I'll make recommends, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the sixth. The balance of the chakra itself, I use words just to give it some context. Faith, as we talked about earlier, which is asking for help from the metaphysical realm, seeing that you got the help, and that builds faith. So faith in this work is built. I create relationships and I ask for help and get feedback, and that builds my faith. And the opposite of that would be greed. That's the attachment. And so these are the deadly sins, right? So, but all the deadly sins are attachment. And what does attachment mean? So if I'm completely attached to my relationship, which in psychology we would call enmeshed. So if I'm absolutely enmeshed in this relationship where I cannot let it go, then I'm having problems in that relationship because of that attachment. We think of greed only as money, but it translates into all things. And so that is my greed of holding on to another person and not letting them go. Usually in my work, I'll tell people, one of the ways to describe this is to hold a steering wheel in a car and grip it as tightly as you possibly can for as long as you can. And even doing this, you will begin to loosen your grip, and your grip will start to ease. And you will still think that you're holding on as tight as you possibly can, but you will not be able to do that. And so this is how the balance of life works, that when we grip too hard, when we hold on too hard, we will eventually lose touch with that relationship. And so that's essentially the definition of codependence, that through fear, we enmesh with other people and we will not let them go. And we will eventually lose them because of that. And so that's a big statement to make, but I think that's where we're talking with the balance of faith and greed. And we talked about Raphael and we talked about the physical body. The planet thing is really, it's interesting because I did this work. I talk right to the guides. I work mostly with the Christ consciousness. And when I'm talking through the pendulum, I'm asking planets. Just give me a planet that basically lines up. So this list that you'll see, Venus lines up with the second chakra. That is not the same as many other systems. And so, and every other system has a different reason why they say what planet is connected to this chakra. I don't think it's as important to say this one is right and those are wrong as how does it all work together? How does the guidance that I received work with the work that we're doing, work with you personally? So that's what I always recommend is when we look at guidance, we have to look at it from the vantage point of where is it coming from, entity, who's it coming through, and where is it going to? That's relationship. And so basically, that's how we can begin to understand when we think of Venus, relationship, it matches up. It's very overly simple, but I think there is a lot of truth in that and a lot of help that can be gained through that.
And of course, I was born during Venus in retrograde, so that makes perfect sense.
Mm. Indeed, right? I mean, we definitely think of, we just came out of a huge retrograde period. So we're kind of riding this wave of, the retrograde energy moving us forward. And so that's definitely what we're all doing right now as humans. And there definitely seems to be, all you astrologers out there, what does it mean that this period of time seems to be revealing hidden things? It really seems to be happening. It's happening a lot in my own life and almost everyone I'm working with.
Pluto.
Yeah, that's what makes sense to me.
Pluto's
So,
doing his magic.
yeah, so definitely notice that in your own lives as you're listening to this. This is a time for the hidden to be revealed so that you can work on it, as you mentioned earlier with family system stuff. So this is where it's bubbling up to the surface, and Pluto is doing that.
So we have the angelic realm.
Mm-hmm.
But which angelic realm did you say? Does
So
Raphael belong to?
Archangel and
Okay, so
yeah. Mm-hmm.
archangels, the stone carnelian,
Mm-hmm.
the essential oil nutmeg,
Mm-hmm.
the planet Venus,
Mm-hmm.
um, Did we? Isn't there? There's more on the. Oh, no! Isn't there more on the chart? I thought there was something else.
Yeah, I call it grace and attachment. So basically, faith and greed. Grace is the
Oh,
faith, and greed is the attachment.
okay.
Mhm.
All right.
And the physical body, just understanding that this inner relationship of this very complex chemical, fungal, bacterial, right? This whole world essentially that is this physical body. That's why we call the root chakra subphysical, because that's all this microbiome essentially. So it's this kind of underneath what we think of as a physical organ. And then we think of the sub-physical as all this microbiome that is delivering messages and making a lot of this work or not work. That's also
Mhm.
true.
And we are 95% microbiome and 5% DNA.
And it's crazy, right? I mean, it's just such an important part of the conversation of who we are.
Yeah.
And and it isn't getting the attention that it deserves.
Yeah.
And so just now we're coming into this like renaissance of understanding the gut and the microbiome in the gut, but it's the whole body, it's the whole thing, that this is
Yeah.
basic, and it fractions out into fungus, bacteria, parasites, right? The things that are below our awareness, that we kind
Viruses.
of want below our awarenesses, right? So we don't really want to be totally aware of how fungus and bacteria are doing their job on a daily basis. We would prefer not to have that level of awareness. So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's been underneath or like subconscious, sub-physical, but it
Mhm.
certainly is determining the health that you are experiencing in this moment.
Mhm. And everything, I mean, well, maybe we touched on this a little last time, but everything in the physical world has a non-physical component.
Absolutely.
So the
Yeah.
earth
So it
does,
mirror.
you do,
Yeah.
the microbiome
Hmm.
does. And you were asking
Absolutely.
me recently to start contemplating that. What is the non-physical component of microbiome? You know?
Yeah. Definitely. Absolutely. And when you think of it as duality, we think of positive, negative, light, dark, right? So if we put it in that context, then we're talking about good bacteria, bad bacteria, right? So again, it doesn't have to be good and bad. It has a job. It all has a job. And if there's less of this bacteria that does this job, then maybe my intestines don't work as well as they could. And so, and this is where we talk about, right, the appendix, the importance of that particular thing that's a vestigial organ that doesn't do anything, or it's where all microbiome is produced and makes a 100% difference in our flora and our intestines. It's one of those two things. So you can kind of investigate that for yourself. But the idea that there's still something present in the body that is useless is not good logic. so so from that standpoint, it is doing something, and that's basically what science is coming up with is, I think it actually is a producer of microbiome and a delivery system into the intestine for that. So I do think that that's a little thing to think about. It's kind of like when we think about adrenaline and cortisol, right? Those are really important story too, as you're talking about the kidneys. So this adrenaline and cortisol, what is the way that we work with this, right? So this body that I live in is run from a cortisol imbalance, and it actually has different names that could be identified as a disease process even. So we could say like I live in this bigger body because it stores fat more, and that's one of the functions of cortisol. And so this, and why does my body choose that? Why did I choose that? And I actually see a very rigid difference from being 6 and 7 years old to being 8, 9 years old. It's like it just changed. And so there's something about that energetically. And the energy basically is connected to the beliefs and the emotions. And so people that have an adrenalized body, and they use adrenaline primarily for that, right, have a thinner body, and they have basically more anger. And that anger is generated from usually a not fairness, but that can trace back into not enough and abandonment. So I think of this body as this is a generative effect of not enoughness that equals grief, or abandonment that equals fear. And so we think of that, and those are developmental. So I've done a lot of my not enough work, and working through the grief. So I'm more at a stage of feeling abandoned and that abandonment equaling fear. And so this body is a direct result of those two constructs, mental and emotional, that equal this work that I'm doing in the world and saying, right, this is who I am in the world today.
So we both have abandonment stuff. I mean, everybody does, but
Yeah,
you got sad about yours, and I got pissed off about mine.
that's
And so
awesome.
you're
It's a
more of
great way
a
to look at it.
cortisol guy, and I'm more of an adrenaline girl.
I think it's perfect, right? I mean, I definitely think that if we think of it in that way, we really can do something about it. Whereas it's like, oh, you have adrenal fatigue. Because why? Because your body's just pumping out adrenaline because of this messaging from your mental body. And so this is where we can say, I look at this body I'm living in and I can say, oh, this is the work I need to work on. So, and that's what and I do think it's a cascade. So in the mental body, which we'll talk more about in that throat chakra, but it starts with not fair, it works into not enough, and it ends up in this abandonment. And then the ultimate conclusion of that is I'm never abandoned and never alone. And so that messaging coming through when it's abandonment and not enough and not fair, and then it drives into this emotional body of anger, right? Not fair. I'm angry about it not being fair. We live in a world where that is very present, right? All of this stuff, right? I just had a huge conversation about trails yesterday, right? And this is,
About what?
this chemtrail. So
Oh
these
yeah.
things that appear to be airplanes flying over the contrail that they create, or some sort of aerosol spraying that links into conspiracies and
Mhm,
what basically is happening when you look
mhm.
up on a particular day and it's Chris Frost with spider webs of these trails.
Hope you're
The
proud of me.
feeling, right? Exactly, right? It's this is the feeling within me that is well beyond what I can control. So that is not fair. That whatever's happening there is not fair. And if I stay there in that place, then that's activating a ton of anger. And that's activating a ton of responsive anger, which would be the chemical adrenaline, fight or flight.
And then all the spirits that maybe don't play in the angelic realms are using that loosh, that
Yeah.
your anger, the
Yes.
loosh as their food. So instead of
Absolutely.
feeding your own system, you're
Hmm.
now just giving all your energy away to
Yes.
something else.
Absolutely. I mean, this
A
is definitely
parasite,
where
basically.
it really is. I mean, that's where we can think these things that manifest, that are created within us, that are parasitic, they don't have our best interest at heart. They just feed off of, and they don't really care if we die or not, because then they'll just move on to somewhere else. That, and comparing that basically to the thought form of demons and devils, and right, so that's what most shamanic traditions think of as this negativa, is their thought forms, because that's the only way we can experience them. And so that thought form, this isn't fair, activating into I am angry, and then like you're saying, this food for the negativa. And
Mhm.
so here I am feeding this process, and I'm also degrading my physical body because I have parasites that are feeding, they're taking my B, so why can't I get enough B vitamins? Because they're taking it. They're doing it, right? They're thriving off of my B vitamins. And so we just think of something very simple like that. It's like, I can't get enough B vitamins because there's parasitic entities and that basically are using that as their fuel and then giving me something that is a byproduct, a waste product that doesn't create health for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, big stories, right? I mean, they're
We'll
really
take your
big
loosh
energies.
and give you some shit. Hey,
Yeah. Hmm.
for you, so for the viewer, you
Yeah.
have heard us say, not fair, not fair, not fair a lot today. And
Hmm.
we've given you, or Kevin rather, has given you some tools of
Yeah.
essential oils and stones and very various things that you can use to work with your second chakra and the emotions and the belief systems that often trap us and create blocks there. But I
Hmm.
wanted to offer up that Kevin has taught me, and it's very helpful. I'm right now. I'm like, oh my God, vetiver for the first chakra,
Mm.
or nutmeg for the second, or coriander, and that's where I was getting at, guys. Is that coriander is a great one to put in your diffuser if you're having a moment or a day or a week or a life of
Yes.
it's not fair.
Perfect.
Coriander is
Excellent.
a good one to put in your diffuser. So
Excellent.
yeah, I have I'm always smelling the cardamom to raise the oxytocin levels, and then I have the
Absolutely.
vetiver for my first chakra, and just very calming and makes me feel somehow
Hmm.
like I have all my shit together. And then,
That's excellent.
putting the nutmeg on my low back, and but really realizing like, oh, I gotta start diffusing some nutmeg because I have not been doing that. I've been putting it on my body.
Great. Excellent.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're always such a wealth of information. I yeah,
It's a pleasure. It is a
I
pleasure to share. Right? Yes, it is.
yeah. Well, I think I've appreciated you since the
Mm,
beginning, and I'll just continue to do that throughout non-time and space.
exactly, right?
So,
So you can think right now as you're listening, like, wow, that was more than an hour that we just listened to this. I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, that time went by just like that.
it did. It did. Um, so everyone, thank you for listening. Deborah, thank you for watching. Thank you for
Mm,
sharing this
thank
on
you.
your page and mine. Um, what else did I want to say, Kevin? Oh, you guys, I forgot. I'm just going to run this a little longer because I forgot to put this ticker tape up that tells you how to get a hold of
Excellent.
Kevin. So it's
Yes.
basically snowwellness.com. And
Hmm.
there's two W's, one at the end of snow and one at the beginning of wellness. So
Excellent.
if hearing him, he's been coming on here a few times, right? Because we had a discussion ourselves and then we did the first chakra and then now here he is again. So
Mhm.
if hearing him, makes you want to receive counsel from him or work with him or and keep in mind when you're working with Kevin, it's not, you don't go to Kevin and then he says, oh well, this is your problem, I've made a computation, uh, this is the solution, and do it. He does give you tools that
Mhm.
it's up to you to implement, but he's
Excellent.
never saying do this.
Right.
And not only that, when you're talking to Kevin, all of the information that you're getting, of course, Kevin has spent his whole life studying his own life and the world around him and the people he relates to. But he's also studied, spirituality and
Mhm.
metaphysics and shamanism and many things. And so he has a vast field of information to pull from. But even beyond that, when you're meeting with Kevin, you are meeting with spirit. Yeshua is going to be present every time you're
Mhm.
talking to him.
Absolutely. Yes.
Magdalene is going to be present,
Mhm.
Mary Magdalene, every time you're talking to him. The angels and the archangels. So they're often whispering into his ear to give you
Mhm.
a message. So you're working with angels, you're working with divine guidance, you're working with Kevin himself. But it's not Kevin's ego that's sitting in front
Right.
of you, in a chair on the other side of that screen saying, well, I've got y'all figured out, kid, and here's what I say you should do. That is not the
Right.
type of counseling or guidance you're getting when you're going to Kevin. And I can attest to that. And that's why I've continued to meet with him once a week. And you might ask,
Mhm.
like, well, if Kevin's so helpful, why are you working with him 5 years later? Like, haven't you worked this stuff out? And it's like,
Right.
well, because I have, as do we all, um, I'm a multifaceted person,
Mhm.
and my soul is very old, and
Yes.
this is also a pinnacle lifetime for me.
Mhm.
So there's a lot, there's a lot to transmute, um, and there's a lot to transform, and uh, and it is a very important life. So it has a lot of homework material in it because this
Totally.
you know this is there's a huge jump between this lifetime and whatever the next incarnation or whatever you're going to call it is going to be, because right,
Hmm.
we're like these angels that had, it's like they had a human body, and then they
Hmm.
changed their frequency and tuned into something else, and they're on this path to ascended mastery, right? So
Absolutely. Yes.
you're as you go along this path, it's like, boy, I sure feel like I have a lot of work, but it's because I've signed up, as has Kevin, for a path of
Hmm.
ascended mastery. So you can have a
Absolutely.
lifetime of a lot of assignments and a lot of homework all at once. And it's not to mean that you can't have fun or whatever, but it's like, that's just my way of helping you understand why it is that
Mhm.
5 years later I'm still working with me. He's not here to fix me. I'm not here to be
Right.
fixed. I'm on a path of ascended mastery, learning lessons, and he's been
Hmm.
on that path too. So there's
Absolutely.
places where he has already trotted some of the path that I'm now walking, and so he's
Hmm.
guiding me through, um,
Nice.
in that way. So anyway, just to help you
Beautiful.
understand a little bit more about who Kevin is and what he does and why
Hmm.
I'm still working with him 5 years later.
I love that. I love that. Much gratitude for that explanation. And it is, that's why when I bring in stuff about myself, this self disclosure is really critical because it is, I'm on this path. So this is not a different path. It's not like I finished all this stuff and I'm all good. So it's like I'm actively participating in this process with whoever I'm working with.
Yeah.
And that process is I recognize you as perfect. So this is really critical. It's a critical component. You are love. You are connected to the oneness of all that is. And you are the truth of who you are. We don't necessarily remember on a daily basis. And so
Mhm.
that's why doing this work with the teachers that I've had, been a student of, and it's a continual reminding. So that this process today is a reminding
Mhm.
that you have chakras. They do certain things. If you do some homework in this area, you'll notice a difference. And hopefully, you'll come to that place of, I am perfect. I am a perfection. And in this duality world that I'm in, I've got work to do. So, in my heart, connected to source, love. I am love. That's why when I tell people, it's really not about loving the self, it's about remembering that you are love. That's my job.
So it's not about loving myself, it's about remembering that I am love.
Absolutely. Right?
In
That
other
is
words, love isn't a verb. It's not something
exactly.
that you do. I'm going to love myself.
Hmm.
I already am
Exactly.
love.
Right. I already am love. That's who I am. That's the emness of me. And when I express that more in the world, I have more balance. That's what this work is, right? So the shamanic work and the psychology is all about balance. It's all about saying this is out of balance. So let's bring it back in. And here are some suggestions on how to do that. And then recognize that it did. And then does it stay there? Sometimes not. Right. Sometimes we come back into balance and we move back out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you've ever been to a chiropractor, right, that's definitely an experience that you have, right? So it's like, whoa, that feels great. Wow, now it doesn't. And so that's what we're doing here is we're doing this internal, mental, emotional, spiritual work so that when we do get that adjustment, it stays.
Yeah.
And so that is our goal in this work for sure. But definitely, you are love. There isn't really anything to fix except these are the things that are going on in my life
Attributes.
that I'd like to be different, right? So
Yeah.
there is balance. There's
Yeah.
balance to be achieved.
Wow. Well, on your
Awesome.
path to ascended mastery, you chose some students that are very challenging, and I'm one of them.
That is all right. And I definitely am grateful for that.
All right, my dear. Well, so if you are interested in this chakra series, we will be working through all the chakras, and we have chosen the first Sunday of every month to do that. So the first Sunday in February, we'll see you back here for a look at the third chakra. If you like, you can take a screenshot of the picture that Kevin is holding up, so you can have that for your own knowledge and
Yeah.
use if you like working with the chakras. Thank you, everybody,
Thank
and
you.
we will see you soon. I'm gonna end the stream. Don't go away immediately. I
All
won't
right.
hold you hostage. I just want to say goodbye on the other end.
All
Okay.
right. Sounds
Ciao,
great.
ciao,
Thank you so
everybody.
much, everyone.
Bye bye.